There's something poetically satisfying about watching your husband's career implode on the same corporate credit card he used to pay for his mistress's crème brûlée. Especially when 17 executives are watching it happen in real time during what they thought would be a quarterly marketing presentation. I didn't plan on becoming the producer of Boston's most exclusive reality show that Wednesday evening. But when your husband of 11 years is dumb enough to take his side piece to the restaurant where your college best friend is the general manager, it's practically the universe handing you the director's chair. Let me back up. I'm Giselle Monroe, 35, Senior Marketing Director at Apex Solutions, a tech firm where working late is a personality trait, and company loyalty is expected to rival your marriage vows. Ironic, considering what I'm about to tell you. My husband Emmett, 37, is, or rather was, our director of sales. The kind of guy who collects LinkedIn endorsements like they're Olympic medals and refers to himself as a rainmaker without a hint of irony. We met at Apex 12 years ago, married 11 years back, and since then we've built what I thought was the perfect power couple life in our Beacon Hill brownstone. No kids. Our careers were our babies, or so we told ourselves at dinner parties where people inevitably asked why we hadn't started a family yet. Giselle, I've got that convention in Chicago tomorrow. 3 days of mindless networking and mediocre hotel coffee, Emmett announced last Tuesday, tossing his overnight bag on our bedroom chair. Reynolds wants me to schmooze the card tech people for that new partnership. I nodded absently, barely looking up from my laptop where I was putting final touches on next day's presentation. What time's your flight? Early. Car service at 5 a.m., he said, checking his Rolex, the one I'd given him for our 10th anniversary. Don't wait up tonight. Gotta prep some materials. When you've been married over a decade, you develop a sixth sense for bullshit. I didn't have that tingle yet, but looking back, all the red flags were there, printed in high definition and waving frantically in my face. The sudden trip, the vague details, the late-night prep work. But 11 years of trust buys a lot of benefit of the doubt. The next day passed in a blur of meetings and deadlines. Around 7 p.m., I was still at the office, drowning in analytics reports, when my phone buzzed with a text from Pierce Sullivan, my friend since our Boston University days and current general manager of Harbor Lights, the C&B Scene restaurant where you need to book 3 months in advance unless you're someone, or sleeping with someone. Weird question. Isn't Emmett supposed to be in Chicago? My stomach didn't just drop. It performed a full Olympic diving routine. Yes. Card tech convention. Why? 3 dots pulsed for what felt like eternity. Because he just walked into my restaurant with Paige Collins from your HR department. Private table in the back. Very cozy. Very not business casual. Paige Collins, 26, the new HR intern with the sunshine smile and Harvard MBA who Emmett had personally championed for our executive training program, the one he mentioned in every other sentence at dinner for the past 3 months. Paige had this brilliant idea. Paige's approach to the staffing issue. Paige brings such fresh energy to the team. I'd been so busy being impressed by his sudden interest in mentorship that I missed what was painfully obvious. My husband was having the world's most transparent midlife crisis. Are you sure it's them? I typed, still clinging to the fraying edges of my reality. Pierce responded with a photo. There they were, Emmett in his power suit, leaning in close to Paige, whose glossy dark hair cascaded over a dress that definitely violated our company's business attire policy. His hand was on hers. The company credit card sat on the table edge. I can't believe he's stupid enough to bring her to my restaurant, Pierce texted. Want me to spit in his food? Just say the word. But I had something much better in mind. Can you give me access to your security camera feed? Just for an hour or so? Pierce, bless his petty heart, didn't even hesitate. System login, managerharborlights.com, password, Boston View 2023. Camera 8 covers their table. This expires in 3 hours. Use it wisely, you magnificent creature. Now I could have gone nuclear immediately. Stormed down there, created a scene worthy of a Bravo reality show, tossed his overpriced Cabernet in his lying face. But I've always believed revenge, like a fine wine, benefits from proper preparation. I looked at my calendar and saw the perfect opportunity. The quarterly strategy meeting scheduled for 8:30 p.m. The one where all department heads, including our CEO Maddox Harrison and Chief Human Resources Officer Vivian Taylor, would be dialing in for updates on our Q2 campaigns. The meeting Emmett was supposed to attend from his Chicago hotel room. I spent the next hour setting the stage. First, I called IT and had them add screen sharing capabilities review to the agenda. Then I practiced my presentation, making sure the important slides were front-loaded. Finally, I sent a company-wide email reminding everyone of the critical strategy alignment happening at 8:30 sharp. At 8:28, I logged into the Harbor Lights security system. Camera 8 provided a crystal-clear view of Emmett refilling Paige's champagne glass, their appetizers half-eaten, his wedding ring clearly visible as he gestured animatedly about something that made her giggle. They were sharing the seafood tower, the one I'd introduced him to on our anniversary 2 years ago. At 8:30, 17 executives joined the Zoom call. I began professionally, walking through the first quarter's marketing wins, engagement metrics, and growth projections. 20 minutes in, right when attention typically starts to wander, I cleared my throat. Before we move to department updates, I'd like to share something relevant to our transparency initiative and resource allocation discussions, I said, my voice steady as a surgeon's hand. I'm going to share my screen for a live demonstration. With 3 clicks, I broadcast the Harbor Lights Camera 8 feed to the entire executive team. There was Emmett, now feeding Paige a forkful of chocolate souffle, her hand playfully swatting his shoulder. The Zoom chat exploded instantly. I continued in my best presentation voice. As you can see, we have an interesting case study in progress. Our director of sales, who expense reported a $1,200 flight to Chicago, $450 per night at the Langham Hotel, and $75 in per diem for the CardTech convention, is actually conducting what appears to be a non-business dinner with our newest HR intern at Harbor Lights. You'll note the corporate Amex on the table, which I'm sure will make for some fascinating expense report reading. Dead silence fell over the call. Cameras that had been off suddenly flickered to life as executives scrambled to witness the corporate car crash in real time. CEO Maddox Harrison, a man whose resting face resembled a disappointed eagle, unmuted first. Ms. Monroe, is this some kind of joke? Not at all, sir. Just demonstrating our new transparency analytics in action. You'll notice from the timestamp that this is happening right now, while Mr. Monroe is supposedly representing us in Chicago. The Chief Human Resources Officer, Vivian Taylor, looked like she'd swallowed a lemon whole. Paige Collins is in her probationary period in our executive training program, the program Emmett personally advocated for her admission to, overruling 2 more experienced candidates. I smiled thinly. What a fascinating coincidence. I've taken the liberty of forwarding relevant email correspondence to compliance and legal before this meeting. Now, shall we continue with the scheduled department updates, or would you prefer to watch the dessert course in its entirety? The next 24 hours unfolded like a corporate disaster movie where I somehow landed the dual roles of protagonist and cinematographer. After broadcasting Emmett's fine dining infidelity to the entire executive team, I calmly wrapped up the meeting as if I hadn't just detonated a C-suite nuclear bomb. My final words: I trust this information will be handled with the same professionalism and discretion that Apex Solutions prides itself on, hung in the air like the world's most passive-aggressive mission statement. The aftermath was immediate. CEO Maddox Harrison, a man who treated ethical violations the way most people treat cockroaches in their kitchen, unmuted himself one final time before ending the call. Ms. Monroe, my office, 7 a.m. tomorrow. Legal and HR will join us. His tone carried all the warmth of a tax audit. Meanwhile, across town at Harbor Lights, Emmett and his dessert companion remained blissfully unaware that they had just starred in Boston's most exclusive private screening. According to Pierce's gleeful text updates, they lingered until nearly 11, with the bill totaling $347, not including the 25% tip Emmett added, because nothing says responsible leadership quite like extravagant spending on your corporate card while committing both marital and professional suicide. I went home, poured myself a glass of the ridiculously expensive Barolo that Emmett had been saving for a special occasion, and methodically began implementing what I now think of as the extinction protocol. First, I called our family lawyer, Diane Winters, leaving a message that managed to be both vague and crystal clear. Diane, it's Giselle Monroe. I need to discuss immediate options regarding a sudden change in my marital situation. Also, any expertise you have on Massachusetts employment law would be particularly helpful. It's urgent. Next, I transferred half of our joint savings to my personal account. Not everything, because unlike my husband, I understand that scorched earth tactics make for dramatic stories but messy court proceedings. Then I changed all my passwords: email, social media, banking, even our Netflix account. Sorry, Emmett, you'll have to find out what happens in the new season of Betrayed Spouses of Boston on your own account. By midnight, I'd drafted a detailed email to our company's head of security, requesting immediate revocation of Emmett's access to our home office systems, due to a potential conflict of interest currently under investigation. I scheduled it to send at 6 a.m., plenty of time to land before my sunrise meeting with Maddox. The crowning achievement of my evening, however, was finding the Find My app still active on Emmett's iPad, which he'd conveniently forgotten in his rush to not go to Chicago. I watched the little blue dot that represented my husband move from Harbor Lights to an address in Brookline that, after a quick property search, turned out to be Paige's luxury apartment complex. How convenient that her executive training program came with such comfortable accommodations for after-hours mentoring sessions. I slept surprisingly well that night, wrapped in the cold comfort of someone who has nothing left to lose, but plenty left to orchestrate. At 6:55 a.m., I walked into Apex headquarters with the serene confidence of someone who had packed her husband's belongings into garbage bags and left them in the building's loading dock with a note that read, "Free to a desperate home. Slightly used sales director with loyalty issues." Maddox's corner office overlooked the Boston Harbor, a view he'd often claimed, "Reminds me daily of the importance of navigating treacherous waters." Today, those waters were about to get choppier than a nor'easter in February. Vivian Taylor from HR was already there, looking like she'd spent the night mainlining espresso and employment law statutes. Beside her sat Franklin Powell, our stone-faced general counsel, whose expression suggested he was mentally calculating billable hours for this particular corporate dumpster fire. "Giselle," Maddox began, "I want to start by saying that regardless of the personal aspects of this situation, your actions last night raised serious concerns about professional judgment and company protocols." I smiled the way I imagined a great white shark might right before a feeding frenzy. "I completely understand, Maddox. That's why I've prepared this folder containing every email, text message, and calendar invitation between Emmett and Paige for the past 4 months. You'll notice on page 3 how he overrode standard protocol to fast-track her application to the executive training program, despite her lacking the required 5 years of industry experience. I placed a second folder on the desk, and this contains the expense reports showing Emmett's pattern of claiming business trips that coincide remarkably with Paige's professional development conferences. The Chicago convention he was supposedly attending? I called them this morning. They have no record of his registration. Vivian winced. Franklin's eyebrow twitched, the legal equivalent of gasping in horror. "While I understand my methods were unconventional," I continued, "I'd like to point out that I discovered and reported a significant misuse of company resources, a violation of our conflict of interest policy, and potentially a case of preferential treatment that exposes Apex to considerable liability. All by using the transparency tools our own company develops and markets to clients." Maddox's face performed an impressive journey from stern disappointment to reluctant appreciation. "That said," I added, "I recognize this is an untenable working situation. So I've prepared a third option." I handed him a final document. "My resignation, effective in 2 weeks, contingent upon a standard non-disclosure agreement, and the severance package outlined on page 2. The silence that followed was the expensive kind, the sort that costs companies 6 figures to maintain. Franklin recovered first. "These terms are unusually specific." "I had an illuminating night," I replied. Maddox leaned back in his chair, studying me with newfound respect. "And if we were to counteroffer with an alternative arrangement?" "I'm listening." "Emmett is the one who violated company policy. It would be Unfortunate to lose two senior leaders over one person's indiscretion. What followed was the most surreal salary negotiation of my career, conducted over the smoldering remains of my marriage and my husband's professional integrity. I left Maddox's office 2 hours later with a promotion to Executive Vice President of Strategic Marketing, a 30% salary increase, and the keys to a new corner office, specifically Emmett's corner office, which would be transitioning ownership effective immediately. By noon, the company Grapevine was producing more content than Netflix. The official story was that Emmett had taken personal leave to address private matters. But the unofficial story spread through Slack channels and break room whispers with the efficiency of a highly contagious virus. I maintained professional composure throughout the day, even when passing Paige in the hallway, who looked like someone had informed her that her dream job had just been reclassified as professional homewrecker with limited career advancement opportunities. Paige, I nodded politely, noting how her complexion matched the ecru wall paint. Giselle, I don't know what to say, she stammered, clutching her portfolio like a shield. No need to say anything, I replied with a smile that could freeze mercury. I believe your quarterly review is next week. I'll make sure your performance is evaluated thoroughly. I'm particularly interested in your contributions to our company culture. She practically sprinted toward the elevator. At 3 p.m., my phone exploded with texts from Emmett, who had apparently just discovered that his keycard no longer worked, his email redirected to an account-suspended message, and his personal items were waiting for him in trash bags at the service entrance. "What have you done?" His first message screamed in all caps, the digital equivalent of a toddler's tantrum. I didn't respond. Some performances deserve no applause. Instead, I walked into my new corner office, placed my nameplate on the desk, and sent a company-wide email introducing myself as the new EVP of Strategic Marketing, adding that I look forward to bringing transparency and integrity to all our operations. My first executive decision? Canceling the executive training program, pending comprehensive review of our selection criteria. My second? Ordering a bottle of champagne sent to Pierce at Harbor Lights with a note that simply read, "Table 8 sends its regards." By Friday morning, a mere 36 hours after the great Table 8 broadcast, I had successfully transformed from wronged wife to corporate phoenix rising from the ashes of her husband's spectacular self-immolation. The speed of this metamorphosis would have made Darwin question his entire evolutionary timeline. What I hadn't anticipated was Emmett's breathtaking commitment to digging his grave even deeper. Around 10 a.m., he made his grand entrance into Apex's lobby, bypassing security by tailgating behind a delivery person. Security footage, which our head of security, Martin, gleefully shared with me, showed him storming toward the executive floor like a man whose privilege had never been questioned. "Ms. Monroe," Martin called, barely containing his excitement. "You might want to see this live feed from reception." I gathered a few key allies, Vivian from HR and Franklin from legal, into my new corner office just in time to witness Emmett's futile attempts to access the executive floor. Watching him repeatedly swipe his deactivated keycard with increasing desperation carried the same morbid satisfaction as seeing someone try to pay for their groceries with expired coupons, multiplied by 11 years of building resentment. "Should we send security?" Vivian asked, clearly enjoying the show despite her professional demeanor. "Let's give him another minute," Franklin suggested, checking his watch. "I want to ensure we have enough footage for the restraining order, should it become necessary." Eventually, Maddox himself emerged from the elevator, flanked by two security guards who looked like they moonlighted as competitive weightlifters. Their conversation wasn't audible on the security feed, but Emmett's face transitioned through more colors than a New England autumn. When Maddox handed him an envelope, containing I knew official notice of his administrative leave pending investigation, Emmett made the critical error of attempting to push past him toward the elevators. "Oh, that's a workplace conduct violation," Vivian narrated, scribbling notes with the enthusiasm of a sports commentator. "And now we definitely have grounds for the restraining order," Franklin added, as the security guards escorted my flailing husband toward the exit. "I want full footage preservation," I instructed Martin, And please make sure the building staff knows he's not to be admitted under any circumstances. After Emmett's forcible departure, I sequestered myself in my office and shifted focus to something even more important than watching my husband's career collapse, ensuring my own success wouldn't be tainted by association. I spent the afternoon meeting individually with my key team members, reassuring them that our department's trajectory remained stable despite the unfortunate situation with leadership and sales. The subtext was clear: align with me and prosper. Mention my personal drama and perish professionally. Your discretion during this transitional period will be noted and remembered, I told each of them, maintaining eye contact just long enough to be slightly uncomfortable. Not a single person brought up Table 8 or Emmett afterward. Funny how effective the right kind of silence can be. Around 4 p.m., I received a call from Diane Winters, my newly retained divorce attorney, who made Machiavelli look like an optimistic kindergarten teacher. "Giselle, I've reviewed your situation, and I have excellent news," she began, her voice carrying the precise tone of someone who thrives on other people's marital catastrophes. "Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state, but given the circumstances of infidelity, particularly with a colleague, and the documented misuse of company resources," she paused for dramatic effect, "we're going to take him to the cleaners, fold him neatly, and put him on the highest shelf where he can't reach anything." I laughed for what felt like the first time in days. "That's why I hired you, Diane. I've already drafted the initial filing. Now, regarding the condo in Beacon Hill, you mentioned it's in both names?" "Yes, but I made the down payment using an inheritance from my grandmother." "Perfect. And the summer cottage in Cape Cod?" "Joint purchase, but all renovations came from my bonus last year." "Even better. And tell me about this corporate investigation. Will there be formal findings?" I smiled into the phone. "Let's just say Apex takes conflicts of interest very seriously when they happen on camera and are witnessed by the entire executive team." We spent the next hour strategizing with the precision of military generals planning an invasion. By the time we hung up, I had a comprehensive battle plan that included financial forensics to trace any hidden spending on his mentorship activities, evidence preservation, those security videos would make fascinating exhibits, and a timeline for legal filings that would ensure maximum leverage. Meanwhile, Emmett had been blowing up my phone all day. The messages evolved from righteous indignation. "How dare you humiliate me like this?" to desperate pleading. "Please, Giselle, let me explain." To pathetic bargaining. "We can work this out. Just call off the corporate wolves." I archived each one without responding, creating a beautiful digital paper trail of consciousness as his reality slowly dawned on him. The final message came at 7:30 p.m. "I'm coming home. We need to talk face to face." That's when I implemented Phase 3 of my extinction protocol. First call: the locksmith who had already changed our apartment locks the previous day, confirming everything was secure. Second call: our building's security desk, informing them that my husband was not authorized to enter and any attempts should be reported to me immediately. Third call: Pierce, who was only too happy to provide an alibi for the evening. "Dinner at Harbor Lights? Table 9, perhaps? Just far enough from Table 8 to avoid bad memories," he suggested with delicious irony. "Perfect. And if you could have the sommelier select something appropriate for celebrating a hostile takeover, that would be lovely." I arrived at the restaurant 20 minutes before Emmett was due at our apartment. Pierce seated me at a table with excellent sightlines to the entrance and handed me a tablet showing our building's lobby security feed, which he'd arranged through a friend in the management company. "You're terrifying, you know that?" he said admiringly. "I prefer strategically proactive," I replied, accepting a glass of champagne. "Besides, 11 years of marriage taught me one thing about Emmett. He's pathologically predictable when cornered." Sure enough, at precisely 8:15 p.m., the tablet showed Emmett striding into our building's lobby, overnight bag in hand, clearly expecting to reclaim his territory. The bewilderment on his face when the concierge blocked his path was priceless. I watched him gesture angrily, presumably explaining that he lived there. The concierge calmly pointed to his computer screen, showing whatever flag I'd placed on our account. The piece de resistance came when Emmett pulled out his phone, no doubt to call me, only to watch me decline his call in real time on the tablet. He looked directly at the security camera then, his face a perfect portrait of a man realizing he was being watched while experiencing the consequences of his own actions. "To your remarkable foresight," Pierce toasted, clinking his glass against mine. "And to table 8, I added, where careers go to die and divorces go to thrive." We were halfway through dinner when my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "This is Paige. We need to talk. It's not what you think." I showed it to Pierce, who nearly choked on his scallop. "The audacity," he sputtered. "What are you going to do?" I smiled the smile of someone who had just been handed the final piece of a complex puzzle. "I think it's time for Phase 4, divide and conquer." "I'm almost afraid to ask," he said, leaning forward eagerly. "Never be afraid of a well-executed information strategy, Pierce. By this time tomorrow, Emmett and Paige will be turning on each other like starving piranhas, and I won't have to lift a finger." Saturday morning arrived with the calm clarity that comes from having a meticulously crafted plan and the emotional detachment to execute it perfectly. After spending the night strategizing over an excellent bottle of Cabernet with Pierce, I'd settled on my approach for handling Paige's unexpected outreach. I texted her at 8 a.m. sharp, "Beacon Street Coffee, 10 a.m., come alone. One chance to talk." Her response was immediate. "Thank you, I'll be there." The coffee shop I'd selected was strategically perfect, public enough to prevent a scene, but with secluded corners for private conversation. More importantly, it was directly across from the boutique hotel where Emmett had secured a room after being locked out of our apartment. The hotel where, according to my building's doorman, who had gleefully reported Emmett's pathetic attempt to have his luggage delivered, he was still staying. I arrived 20 minutes early, secured a table with sightlines to both the entrance and the hotel across the street, and settled in with a cappuccino and the morning's financial news. Success is the best accessory, and I wanted Paige to see me thriving, not suffering. She arrived precisely at 10, looking like she'd spent the night rehearsing what to say in front of her bathroom mirror. Her usual polished appearance had given way to something more desperate: minimal makeup, hair pulled back hastily, designer bag clutched like a shield. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I know you have every reason to hate me." "Hate requires emotional investment I'm not willing to make," I replied with practiced indifference. "I'm here out of professional courtesy. You have 10 minutes. She flinched slightly. "Good. Giselle, this isn't what you think. Emmett told me you two were separated. He said you were already seeing other people and staying together for appearances." The words tumbled out in a practiced rush. "He showed me texts from you canceling dates, emails about how busy you were. He said you'd agreed to an open marriage." I maintained my neutral expression, though internally I was cataloging each lie for future reference. "And you believed him without verification? Harvard MBA, and you didn't conduct due diligence on such a significant risk?" Her cheeks flushed. I thought I was in love. He was so convincing, so attentive. Love doesn't require corporate credit cards at 5-star restaurants, I observed mildly, sipping my coffee. Or expense-paid fake business trips. That was all him, she insisted, leaning forward. I never asked for any of that, and I had no idea he was using company resources. That's why I reached out. I don't want my career destroyed because I believed someone's lies. And there it was, her true motivation. Not remorse, not ethical awakening, but professional self-preservation. I almost respected the honesty. "What exactly do you want from me, Paige?" She hesitated. "I want to make this right. I've already spoken with HR about transferring to our Seattle office. I've been offered a position there starting next month. How convenient for you." "It wasn't my idea," she protested. "Vivian suggested it as the cleanest break for everyone. But before I go, I wanted to tell you that Emmett's been saying things about you to executives, trying to undermine your position." Now that was interesting. "What kind of things?" "That you set him up, that you knew about the dinner and orchestrated everything to humiliate him and steal his promotion." She glanced down. "He's been reaching out to board members, claiming you violated his privacy and company protocol." I couldn't help but smile. Emmett was following the predictable playbook of mediocre men everywhere. When caught, claim conspiracy. "Thank you for the information," I said, my mind already racing with countermeasures. "Is there anything else?" I'm sorry. Truly." Her eyes filled with tears that might have been genuine. "I never meant to hurt anyone. Intent and impact are different animals, Paige. Remember that in Seattle." I stood, gathering my things. "Our 10 minutes are up." As I turned to leave, I added casually, "By the way, did Emmett mention he's been seeing someone else besides you? A client relations manager from Card Tech named Melissa? They've been meeting at the Revere Hotel during those Chicago conventions for months." The color drained from her face. "What? No, that's not. He wouldn't." "Check his text messages under Mel, CT. Password is his birthday backwards." I smiled thinly. "Harvard MBA, remember? Always verify your sources." I walked out without looking back, but the security camera footage Pierce had arranged for me to access later showed exactly what I expected. Paige furiously typing on her phone, then storming across the street toward Emmett's hotel with murder in her eyes. Phase 4 was proceeding perfectly. By Monday morning, the corporate grapevine was buzzing with news that Paige Collins had been spotted having a spectacular meltdown in the lobby of the Revere Hotel, screaming accusations at Emmett about another woman, while he frantically tried to deny everything. A hotel security guard had captured the entire scene on his phone, and while it hadn't made it to social media yet, the video was circulating among Apex employees faster than the annual bonus rumors. The timing couldn't have been better. The board had called an emergency meeting to discuss the recent leadership disruptions, and I walked in armed with a comprehensive presentation on department restructuring that elegantly solved the Emmett problem, while positioning me as the solution-oriented professional above personal drama. "Given recent events," I began, addressing the room of stern-faced executives, "I believe we have an opportunity to streamline our sales and marketing alignment for greater efficiency." My proposal was simple but strategic. Fold sales under the marketing umbrella temporarily while conducting an external search for a new sales director. This would give me oversight of both departments during the transition, effectively neutralizing any influence Emmett might still have while positioning me as indispensable to the company's stability. This approach prevents operational disruption while maintaining our Q2 targets, I concluded, displaying a timeline that coincidentally extended my expanded authority through the next 2 fiscal quarters. And it signals to our team that personal matters don't interfere with professional excellence at Apex. The board approved my proposal unanimously. By lunchtime, I had access to all of Emmett's departmental files, contacts, and projects. By 3 p.m., I'd identified and secured loyalty from his 3 most competent team leaders. By 5 p.m., I'd drafted an all-hands announcement framing the changes as strategic optimization rather than "your boss got caught with his pants down." The final touch came Tuesday morning, when Maddox called me into his office to show me Emmett's formal resignation letter, which had arrived overnight along with a settlement agreement waiving any claims against the company, in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement and neutral reference. "Impressive outcome," Maddox noted, studying me with newfound respect. "From catastrophe to clean resolution in less than a week. Crisis management is part of the job," I replied modestly. "And Paige?" "Accepted a transfer to our Seattle office, effective immediately. I believe it's for the best." What I didn't mention was that her transfer came with a confidential agreement to provide a detailed statement about Emmett's manipulation of the training program selection process, insurance against his future attempts at reputation rehabilitation. That evening, I treated myself to dinner at Harbor Lights, Table 10, a respectable distance from the now infamous Table 8. Pierce joined me, bringing a bottle of champagne that he'd been saving for a truly worthy occasion. "To clean endings," he toasted. "And strategic new beginnings," I added, clinking my glass against his. As we enjoyed our celebratory dinner, Pierce's phone lit up with a text. He glanced at it and burst into laughter. "What?" I asked. "Emmett just texted me asking if I'd represent him in the divorce." He showed me the message. "Apparently your lawyer is playing hardball, and he needs someone who understands how these things work." I nearly choked on my champagne. The audacity of mediocre men never ceases to amaze me. I told him I have a conflict of interest, Pierce replied, his eyes meeting mine with unmistakable warmth. A very intriguing conflict of interest. I raised my glass again. To conflicts of interest? Sometimes they lead to the most interesting opportunities. 6 months can change everything. Half a year since table 8. Half a year since I traded in my wedding ring for a corner office, and the profound satisfaction of watching a house of cards collapse under the weight of its own deception. I'm sitting on the balcony of my new waterfront apartment, watching the Boston Harbor glitter in the autumn sunset. The Beacon Hill brownstone went to Emmett in the divorce settlement, not because he deserved it, but because I wanted nothing that carried the fingerprints of our marriage. A clean slate was worth more than square footage and historical architecture. The divorce was finalized last week. 3 hours in a mediator's office, signatures on multiple documents, and 11 years of marriage reduced to asset division spreadsheets and custody arrangements for our only joint venture, a surprisingly resilient ficus plant named Ferdinand. Emmett got the plant. I got freedom. Do you regret any of it? My sister Natalie asked when I called to tell her it was officially over. She's been my emotional safety net throughout this entire saga, offering wisdom from her Seattle sanctuary where she teaches philosophy to bright-eyed college students who think they've invented existentialism. Regret is for people who lack forward momentum, I replied, surprising myself with how much I meant it. I spent 11 years with a man who couldn't even cheat competently. The only thing I regret is not having better surveillance equipment to capture his face when everything imploded. The professional aftermath has been nothing short of remarkable. Apex Solutions experienced a 23% increase in sales after I implemented the new cross-departmental structure. Turns out, removing a narcissistic middle manager with mediocre ideas and replacing him with a streamlined reporting system works wonders for efficiency. The board made my expanded role permanent last month, along with a compensation package that would make Emmett's eyes water if he knew the details. As for the other players in our little corporate drama, Paige lasted exactly 6 weeks in Seattle before accepting a position with a competitor in Portland. According to LinkedIn, she's now a strategic human capital consultant, which I assume means professional job hopper with an exaggerated title. Emmett tried and failed to secure a director-level position at 3 different companies, all of which mysteriously received anonymous emails containing security footage from a certain restaurant. He's currently working as a sales manager at a mid-tier tech company in Providence, making roughly half his previous salary and reporting to someone 5 years his junior. I wish I could say I orchestrated his professional downfall, but karma apparently works pro bono these days. The most unexpected development has been Pierce Sullivan, who parlayed his restaurant management experience into launching a boutique hospitality consulting firm. We've been meeting for dinner every Thursday since the champagne toast 6 months ago. Strictly professional at first, then gradually evolving into something neither of us was looking for, but both of us apparently needed. You know what's ironic? Pierce said last week as we shared dessert at a new restaurant far from Harbor Lights. If Emmett had chosen literally any other restaurant in Boston for his affair, we never would have met. The universe has a peculiar sense of humor, I agreed, stealing the last bite of tiramisu. Imagine building your career on strategic planning only to be destroyed by tactical stupidity. Last I heard through the corporate grapevine, Emmett and his card tech paramour Melissa had a short-lived rebound relationship that collapsed when he discovered she was also seeing her CrossFit instructor. Apparently, being the backup option wasn't as appealing as being the main attraction. Shocking. People often ask if I'm over it yet, as if emotional recovery follows a linear timeline with a defined endpoint. The truth is more nuanced. Am I over the marriage? Absolutely. Am I over the betrayal? Not entirely, but I've repurposed that particular emotion into something more productive. The experience taught me 3 invaluable lessons. First, trust, but verify. I now apply the same due diligence to my personal relationships that I do to marketing campaigns. Transparency isn't just a corporate buzzword. It's the foundation of any relationship worth maintaining. Second, revenge is a dish best served on company letterhead. Public confrontations make for dramatic stories, but strategic professional maneuvering creates lasting consequences. Emmett lost more than a wife. He lost his career trajectory, his reputation, and his inflated sense of invincibility. Third, and perhaps most importantly, catastrophe often clears the path for opportunity. Without Table 8, I would still be second fiddle in a department I should have been running, married to a man whose mediocrity I had mistaken for stability. Next week, I'm flying to New York to present our success case study at an industry conference. Pierce is coming along, officially as a networking opportunity, unofficially as something we're still defining, but both enjoying tremendously. My keynote speech is titled, Transparency as a Competitive Advantage: How Clear Communication Transforms Organizations. The irony isn't lost on me. Life after infidelity isn't about rebuilding what was lost. It's about constructing something entirely new from better materials. And if you're smart about it, you can architect a reality so superior to your previous existence that you find yourself almost grateful for the demolition. Almost. As for Emmett, I hear Table 8 at Harbor Lights is permanently reserved under his name, not because he ever dines there again, but because Pierce thought it would make an excellent corporate cautionary tale. Some legacies aren't quite what we envision for ourselves. Apparently, when your husband calls your family pathetic while texting his mistress under the table at your 5-year-old's dinosaur birthday party, the court sees it less as having a bad day and more as being the human equivalent of a dumpster fire behind a Walmart. There I was, Victoria Harrison, 34, the soon-to-be ex-Mrs. Graham Harrison Esquire, standing in a lawyer's office clutching transcripts of my husband's greatest betrayal hits like they were Taylor Swift tickets. 7 years of marriage reduced to evidence exhibits A through Z, an alphabet of adultery with a side of financial fraud. It all started at Ethan's 5th birthday party, where I'd transformed our backyard in Lakewood Heights, Austin's most pretentious gated community, where the HOA once fined someone for having wind chimes that disrupted the neighborhood's acoustic aesthetic, into a paleontologist's dream. I'd spent 3 weeks crafting papier-mâché volcanoes and digging up my flower beds to create fossil pits, essentially trading my landscaping for my son's momentary happiness. You know, standard American motherhood. Destroy your property value to entertain children who'd rather be playing Fortnite. Graham arrived 43 minutes late, because apparently, I'll be there at 2 means I'll finish having lunch with my assistant, then swing by the office to send some emails, then stop for a Starbucks, and saunter in when the party's half over, in husband language. He waltzed in wearing his $3,000 suit to a children's party like he was expecting to close a merger with the clown. While our son was surrounded by 12 other kindergartners from the Lakeside Academy, a place that charges more for finger painting lessons than my parents paid for my entire college education, my darling husband leaned in close, bourbon breath assaulting my senses. I'd rather be with her than stuck at this pathetic family charade, he whispered, apparently thinking I couldn't hear him over the chorus of tone-deaf 5-year-olds butchering happy birthday. What Graham didn't know, because observational skills aren't covered in law school, was that the silver pen in my cardigan pocket wasn't a writing instrument, but a $29.99 voice recorder from Amazon. Prime shipping, free returns, and the ability to document marital treachery, truly living the American dream. I wasn't always Inspector Gadget with recording devices. Before becoming an amateur surveillance expert, I was just your standard trophy wife who gave up her design school dreams faster than suburban moms abandon diets after a tough Tuesday. But when your husband starts taking emergency client calls at 11 p.m. on Saturdays and returns smelling like he fell into a vat at the Chanel factory, even the most trusting wife starts considering alternative career paths in espionage. Victoria, you're too distracted to notice anything, he'd said at our Memorial Day barbecue, laughing with his law firm buddies while flipping burgers that would later give everyone mild food poisoning. A metaphor for our marriage if I ever saw one. She thinks I'm working late. It's actually pathetic how clueless she is. That night, I ordered the recorder, which Amazon helpfully categorized as frequently bought together with divorce self-help books and single-serving wine glasses. By 4th of July weekend, I had enough material to produce a 13-episode Netflix series called How to Gaslight Your Wife While Banging Your Assistant, a legal professional's guide to ethics violations. The star of this potential Emmy winner? Sylvia Paxton, his 29-year-old assistant with lips so overfilled they had their own zip code and a Harvard law degree that apparently specialized in dictation taken horizontally. "I just need to figure out how to keep the lake house and minimize what I give her," Graham told someone on the phone one night while I was supposedly asleep upstairs, probably dreaming about having a faithful husband like the delusional idiot he thought I was. The idiot doesn't even have her own career. She dropped out of design school to support me. Can you believe that? He laughed. Best investment I ever made. That line would later cost him approximately $42,569 per word in the settlement. But the birthday party whisper? That was the pièce de résistance, the cherry on top of my evidence sundae. What kind of monster trashes his family while his kid is literally making a wish for more Legos and less parental dysfunction? 1 week later, I interviewed 3 divorce attorneys. The first 2 were men recommended by friends. Both seemed competent, but had the aggression level of golden retrievers at a dog park. Then came Grace Reynolds, a 48-year-old legal barracuda in Jimmy Choo heels, whose resting face screamed, "I eat male attorneys for breakfast and floss with their egos." "Mrs. Harrison," she said after hearing 15 minutes of my recordings, finally revealing a smile that reminded me of documentaries about great white sharks. "With these recordings, we're not just going to divorce your husband. We're going to make him wish he'd chosen a career in fast food management." The plan was brilliantly simple. File for divorce requesting full custody, 70% of our assets, including the precious lake house that Graham loved more than possibly his own mother, substantial alimony, and funding for me to finish my design degree. The recordings would be our nuclear option if he contested anything. Mutually assured destruction, but with only one party getting mutually assured. When Graham was served papers at his downtown office, timed perfectly to arrive during his big client meeting because Grace had the pettiness of a scorned teenager but the strategic mind of a chess champion, he called me laughing. "Victoria, what is this? 70%? Full custody? Are you delusional? No judge would ever—" "Check your email, Graham," I interrupted, my voice calmer than a meditation app narrator who's secretly on Xanax. The line went silent as he presumably opened the audio file I'd sent. The one where he detailed to his golf buddy how he'd been moving money to a separate account for Sylvia's condo down payment. The silence lasted so long I wondered if he'd had a stroke. Career-ending emails tend to have that effect. "This is illegal," he finally sputtered, his lawyer voice cracking like a teenager asking someone to prom. "Texas is a one-party consent state, darling. I consented to record my own conversations. Maybe you should have paid attention in law school instead of wondering which interns would be easily impressed by a mediocre man with a good tie collection." 3 days later, Graham and his attorney, a normally aggressive litigator named Barrett whose online bio described him as relentless, but whose current expressions suggested recently colonoscoped, sat across from Grace and me. I'd never seen Graham's forehead vein throb quite so impressively. "Ms. Reynolds," Barrett began, looking like he wanted to retire immediately. "My client is prepared to accept Mrs. Harrison's terms in full, provided the recordings remain confidential." Grace smiled her shark smile. "We'll need the agreement executed today and the first alimony payment by Friday. Consider this a rush fee for years of emotional labor." And just like that, 7 years of marriage ended in a 90-minute meeting on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Graham signed away the lake house, agreed to my custody terms, and committed to paying for my degree completion, all while looking like he was simultaneously passing a kidney stone and realizing he'd never be made partner now. As we left the building, Grace handed me a business card. "For when any of your friends need me," she said with a wink. "The recorder wives always win." Now you might be wondering what happened to poor, unsuspecting Sylvia. Last I heard, she and Graham are sharing his new 800-square-foot studio apartment near his office. From 4,500 square feet on the lake to a place where the shower is basically in the kitchen. Turns out romance loses its spark when you're splitting rent, and your boyfriend's salary is mostly going to alimony and child support. Who would have thought that investing in the future Mrs. Harrison too? 0 would yield such disappointing returns? Meanwhile, Ethan and I moved to the lake house permanently. I re-enrolled in design school, started a small interior design Instagram that's actually taking off, and have dinner with my sister Faye every Thursday when she drives in from Dallas. But this isn't the end of the story, because Graham Harrison made one critical mistake beyond the cheating, the lies, and the insults. He underestimated exactly who he married. And that, my friends, is where our story really begins. Graham's first mistake was cheating. His second was getting caught. His third, and most catastrophic, was showing up unannounced at the lake house 3 weeks after our divorce was finalized, still acting like he owned the place. Spoiler alert, a man who can't even own his mistakes definitely doesn't own this real estate anymore. I was in the middle of my Reclaim Your Space renovation project, which involved transforming our formerly masculine dark wood and leather great room into something that didn't look like a hunting lodge designed by a man compensating for nature's shortcomings. The walls were now a serene sea foam, the mounted deer head, Graham's pride and joy, had been donated to a local dive bar's men's room for target practice, and his precious leather recliner, the throne from which he'd issued so many complaints about my cooking, had mysteriously found its way to Goodwill, where even the desperate passed it by. "What the hell did you do to my house?" Graham stood in the doorway, his face cycling through emotions like a slot machine that keeps landing on horrified loser. "Our house? Oh, honey," I smiled sweetly. "I think you meant to say my house." I pointed to the framed divorce agreement hanging prominently above the fireplace. Not subtle, but then again, neither was sleeping with your assistant while your kid blows out birthday candles. Interior design tip. Nothing ties a room together quite like legally binding documentation of your ex's moral failures. He walked through the space like a health inspector in a gas station bathroom, wincing at each change. "Where's my grandfather's whiskey cabinet? Sold it on Facebook Marketplace. Turns out mid-century furniture is very popular with the hipster crowd in East Austin. Paid for Ethan's summer camp," I replied. "Though technically, I sold my cabinet, according to that fancy document you signed faster than a teenager agreeing to unread terms and conditions. You had no right to—" Section 12. Paragraph 3 of our agreement states that all furniture and decorative items not specifically listed in Appendix B became my sole property, I recited, channeling my inner Grace Reynolds with a side of, "I told you so" sauce. Maybe read the paperwork before you sign it next time. Or is reading comprehension something they only teach at Harvard to the assistants you're not sleeping with? Graham's face cycled through 50 shades of purple. In our marriage, I'd been trained to back down when he got that look, the one that said I was being difficult and irrational. The same way you train a golden retriever to sit, except with emotional manipulation instead of treats. Amazing how much less intimidating that expression becomes when the person making it no longer controls your bank accounts or your self-esteem. "Where's Ethan?" he demanded, changing tactics faster than a politician caught on a hot mic. "At his playdate with Connor from school. You'd know that if you'd bothered to check the co-parenting app the court ordered you to use." I smiled sweetly. "The same app that logs when you miss check-ins. It's like Instagram for parental negligence and, honey, you're trending." Graham collapsed onto my new white sofa, with his shoes on naturally. The man respected boundaries about as well as a toddler respects a freshly mopped floor. "I've been busy at work. Too busy for the mandatory parent-teacher conference last Thursday, the one where Ms. Bentley asked about Ethan's home situation because he told his class that Daddy loves his work friend more than Mommy. Nothing says Father of the Year quite like being your kindergartner's first case study in betrayal." That landed like a slap. For all his faults, Graham had always prided himself on being perceived as a good father, even if the reality fell somewhere between absent and when is baseball season over. Image management was his specialty, like being the guy who posts charity 5K photos on Instagram but takes an Uber to the finish line. "Victoria, this divorce is killing me professionally. Barrett says clients are requesting different attorneys. The partners are concerned about optics." I resisted the urge to play the world's smallest violin with the world's largest bow. Gosh, it's almost like actions have consequences. Who could have predicted that cheating on your wife, raiding your marital assets, and getting caught in spectacular fashion might impact how people see you? It's almost like integrity matters in a profession based on trust. Weird. I need to use the lake house for a client retreat next month, he said, switching to his negotiation voice, the one he practiced in the shower that made him sound like he was auditioning for a Batman villain role. It would go a long way toward repairing my professional reputation. I burst out laughing so hard I nearly choked on my own disbelief. Let me get this straight. You want me to lend you my house so you can pretend to clients that you still own it? That's not just delusional, that's pathological. Next, you'll be asking to borrow my identity because yours is in the credibility dumpster. I'll pay, he offered, desperation creeping into his voice like mold in a foreclosed McMansion. Graham, the spousal support you send each month is already technically your money paying for my house. This would just be, what's that accounting term you love? Double dipping. Like your dating strategy during our marriage. He stood up, brushing imaginary lint from his $3,000 suit. The business equivalent of a codpiece, all show and symbolism. You know, you've changed. Thank you. That's literally the nicest thing you've said to me in years. I've upgraded like an iPhone, while you're still running the same buggy operating system. It wasn't a compliment. And yet, I smiled. I'm taking it as one, along with the house, the retirement account, and the good china. As he headed for the door, shoulders slumped in defeat like a participation trophy dad at a competitive travel soccer tournament, I couldn't resist one parting shot. How's the studio apartment working out? Sylvia adjusting to life without a walk-in closet? I hear relationships really blossom when you can hear each other's bathroom activities through paper-thin walls. He froze. How did you know about the closet thing? Oh, Graham. You really think the recorder was the only trick up my sleeve? Sylvia's been complaining to her sister about your temporary living situation for weeks. The sister who happens to be in my Thursday night book club. The look on his face was better than therapy and cheaper too, which matters when you've been a financially dependent spouse whose husband controlled the credit cards like a dictator with nuclear codes. Small world, isn't it? Almost as small as your apartment. Though I hear the fold-down Murphy bed is very European chic. Very divorced dad who didn't plan ahead. I waved cheerfully. Close the door on your way out. The AC bill is astronomical this time of year, though I suppose you wouldn't know, since your new place is the size of our old guest bathroom. After he left, I poured myself a glass of the expensive Cabernet I'd been saving for a special occasion, like watching my ex-husband realize that karma doesn't just exist in Instagram captions. 7 years ago, when I dropped out of design school to support Graham's career, I thought I was investing in our future. Turns out I was just funding the lifestyle to which he and his future girlfriend would become accustomed, like a human Kickstarter for someone else's happiness. But here's what Graham never understood about me. I wasn't just some trophy wife he picked up at a law school mixer. Before I became Mrs. Harrison, I was Victoria Mercer, daughter of a poker champion and a high school drama teacher. I learned bluffing from my dad and performance from my mom, the soft-spoken, accommodating wife. That was just a role I played because it made life easier, like pretending to enjoy Graham's friends or his performance in bed. Until it didn't. The Monday after Graham's surprise visit, I received a call from Diane Harrison, my former mother-in-law, and the woman who once told me at our rehearsal dinner that Graham could have done better, but at least you're pretty enough to distract from your limited accomplishments. Victoria, dear, she began, as if we were still family and not two people connected by mutual disdain and legal documents. Graham says you're being unreasonable about the lake house. The summer gala has always been held there. It's tradition. The summer gala, the annual Harrison family event where Boston-level old money pretended they were genuinely happy to see each other while passive-aggressively comparing vacation homes and children's accomplishments. I'd spent 7 years being critiqued on everything from my table settings, so creative for someone without formal training, to my interesting choice of career sacrifice. Not many women these days are brave enough to admit they prefer dependency. Tradition is such a lovely word for repeating the same mistakes over and over while expecting people to be grateful for the privilege, I replied. Unfortunately, the house is being renovated all summer. Such a shame. The contractors are already behind schedule, like Graham was for most of our marriage milestones. You can pause renovations for one weekend. she insisted with the entitlement of someone who's never heard the word no, without immediately asking for a manager. Could, but won't. By the way, how's Sylvia? Graham seemed so concerned about her adjustment to downsized living. Must be difficult going from aspiring trophy wife to studio apartment dweller. Like going from Bergdorf's to TJ. Max without passing go. The silence on the other end was delicious, like a calorie-free dessert made of pure satisfaction. You know about her? Diane finally asked, her voice higher than her champagne standards. Diane, everyone knows about her. Your son isn't exactly a master of discretion. He's about as subtle as a rhinestone codpiece at a funeral. I could practically hear her pearls being clutched through the phone. The Harrison family operated on one key principle. Appearances matter more than reality. You could be miserable, unfaithful, or morally bankrupt. Just don't get caught and make the family look bad. It's the WASP version of snitches get stitches. We should discuss this in person, she said finally, probably already planning which emotional manipulation tactics would work best with direct eye contact. Why? So you can offer me money to play nice and preserve the precious Harrison name? No thank you. I've already cashed in all my pretending to like you people chips. Victoria, be reasonable. I was reasonable for 7 years. Now I'm something much better. I'm free. It's like kicking off uncomfortable Spanx at the end of a long day. Except the Spanx was your son's expectations and the day lasted 7 years. After hanging up, I checked Ethan's lunchbox for his return from the playdate and found a surprise, a small plastic dinosaur with a note from Graham. Miss you, buddy. See you this weekend. Love, Dad. For a moment, something almost like guilt flickered. Then I remembered Graham checking his phone during Ethan's school play, missing his son's first swim competition for a work emergency, aka hotel rendezvous with Sylvia, and telling our 5-year-old to man up when he cried after falling off his bike. I placed the dinosaur on Ethan's bed where he'd find it. Whatever my feelings about Graham, Ethan deserved a relationship with his father, even if that father had a lot of growing up to do himself. Like the kind of growing up most people accomplish before reproducing, not after being court-ordered to take parenting classes. What I didn't know then was that Graham's surprise visit and Diane's call weren't random events. They were reconnaissance missions. The Harrisons were gathering intelligence, assembling allies, and preparing for war, like a waspy version of Game of Thrones, but with passive-aggressive brunch invitations instead of dragons. And I had just shown my hand. The first sign of trouble arrived in my inbox at 6:42 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 month after Graham's lake house ambush. The email was from Meredith Caldwell, Ethan's school principal, a woman who wore her Ivy League education and marathon completion times as accessories more prominently than her designer scarves. Mrs. Harrison, we need to discuss some concerning payment issues with Ethan's enrollment for the upcoming school year. Please call my office at your earliest convenience. I nearly spit out my coffee, the overpriced single-origin Ethiopian blend that was one of the few bougie habits I'd kept from my Graham's arm candy days. I'd paid Ethan's tuition for the entire year, $32,000, which is what some people spend on cars, but in Austin's elite education circle, barely covers the cost of teaching 5-year-olds to say namaste after yoga and gracias after organic Taco Tuesdays. When I called the school, Meredith's assistant put me straight through. In private school hierarchy, this is the equivalent of being rushed past the velvet rope at a club. Either you're very important, or there's a PR disaster brewing with your name on it. Victoria, this is awkward, Meredith began, her voice dripping with that uniquely Texan blend of sweetness and judgment that could give you diabetes and depression simultaneously. We received notification from Graham's attorney that he's contesting the use of joint funds for Ethan's education. The payment has been flagged and we cannot process Ethan's enrollment until this legal matter is resolved. That's impossible. The divorce agreement specifically covers educational expenses, and the money came from my personal account, not a joint account. I have the receipts, both literal and figurative. I understand, but Mr. Harrison's attorney provided documentation suggesting those funds were improperly obtained. Our hands are tied until we receive court clarification. My blood pressure skyrocketed like Bitcoin in a Musk tweet. And when exactly did you receive this notification? Last Thursday, 5 days ago. They'd waited until the last possible moment before school enrollment closed to drop this bomb. Classic lawyer tactic: create a time crunch that forces your opponent into panic mode, like a Black Friday sale combined with an IRS audit. "I'll handle this immediately," I said, already mentally rehearsing the scathing text I'd send Graham, something along the lines of, "Congratulations on finding new ways to be terrible at parenting without technically committing child abuse." But before I could hang up, Meredith cleared her throat with the ominous precision of someone about to say something they've rehearsed in front of a mirror. "There's one more thing. Given the circumstances, the board is reviewing Ethan's situation. Lakeside Academy prides itself on providing a stable environment. Bitter custody disputes can be disruptive to our community standards." I gripped my phone so hard I'm surprised it didn't compress into a diamond. "Are you threatening to expel my 5-year-old because his father is being vindictive? What exactly are your community standards? Children whose parents stay in loveless marriages for the sake of continuous enrollment?" "Of course not," she backpedaled faster than a politician caught on a hot mic. "We're simply concerned about Ethan's well-being. Perhaps both parents could attend our mediation session next week." I ended the call before saying something that would definitely get Ethan expelled and possibly get me added to a school security watch list. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Graham. "Heard from Lakeside? Let's talk. Lunch at Perla's, 1 p.m. The audacity of this man would be impressive if it weren't so infuriating. He creates a crisis, then positions himself as the solution, like an arsonist applying for a firefighting job. I texted back, "Can't make lunch. Too busy fixing your mess." Again, it's like having another child, except this one has a law degree and erectile dysfunction. Instead of meeting Graham, I called Grace Reynolds, who answered on the first ring because sharks never sleep. "They're making a play for the house," Grace said after I explained the situation. "Classic strategy. Create leverage by threatening something you value, then offer a compromise where you give up what they really want. It's negotiation 101, or as I call it, how men in expensive suits think they're being clever. But the house is mine, fair and square. No judge would overturn that." "Correct, which is why they're going after Ethan's school placement. They know you'd do anything for your son, including potentially renegotiating settled assets. It's like holding a puppy hostage to steal your car." My stomach dropped faster than home values during the 2008 housing crisis. So what's the countermove? First, we file an emergency motion about the school tuition. Second, we need to understand what we're really dealing with. Grace paused with the dramatic timing of someone who's practiced in delivering plot twists. "Victoria, how much do you know about Graham's finances?" "Everything in the disclosure documents." "And you trust those documents are complete?" "Because I trust them about as much as I trust a gas station sushi display in August." I thought about it. Graham had surrendered remarkably quickly when faced with the recordings. Almost too quickly, like a toddler who stops arguing about bedtime. It usually means they've hidden something under the mattress. "You think he's hiding assets?" I said, the realization dawning like a hangover on New Year's Day. "I think it's worth finding out." Graham folded too easily for a man with his ego and resources. It's like watching a poker player fold with a full house. Something's not right. "Do you still have access to any of his accounts, passwords, or documents?" Grace asked, probably already mentally spending her contingency fee percentage. I didn't. But what I did have was something potentially more valuable: an invitation to Faye's book club that evening, where Sylvia's sister Audrey would be present. In the suburban intelligence community, book clubs are like CIA black sites, but with more wine and passive aggression. Book club that night was held at Janine's McMansion in Westlake Hills, a house so aggressively large it seemed to be compensating for something. Probably Janine's husband Todd's personality. The wine flowed freely and the gossip even more so. I arrived fashionably late, armed with a $50 bottle of Pinot Noir and a mission that would make Jason Bourne look like an amateur if he wore Lululemon and carried a tote bag that said rosé all day. Audrey Barnes wasn't hard to spot. She had the same carefully maintained blonde highlights and designer handbag as her sister. The kind of woman who says, "I don't need Botox yet," while being physically unable to show surprise. I maneuvered to sit next to her during the discussion of whatever book no one had actually read beyond the Amazon reviews. 3 glasses of wine later, as the conversation devolved from literary criticism to relationship drama, faster than a Bachelor contestant's Instagram following after the finale, I made my move. "So, Audrey, how's your sister doing these days?" "Sylvia, right? I think our partners work together." Audrey rolled her eyes so dramatically it was a wonder her lash extensions didn't take flight. "She's a mess. Apartment living is traumatic for her after Graham promised her the lake house. She had already started a Pinterest board called Lake House Glow Up with 47 varieties of shiplap. I nearly choked on my wine. He promised her my house? Realizing her mistake, Audrey backpedaled like a circus performer. I mean, he said eventually they'd have a place on the lake. You know how men exaggerate, like dating profiles and retirement accounts. "Oh, absolutely," I nodded sympathetically. Men like Graham are always making promises they can't keep, like fidelity, financial security, and basic human decency. Audrey leaned in, lowering her voice to a volume that was still perfectly audible to everyone pretending not to listen. "Right?" Sylvia was counting on becoming a partner's wife, not struggling to pay the bills because all his money goes to his ex. She had to cancel her monthly Botox appointment. Her forehead actually moved last week. It was disturbing. I matched her conspiratorial tone. That must be tough for her. I'm sure Graham has a plan, though. He always does. Like a cartoon villain, but with better suits and less self-awareness. The offshore thing better work out. That's all I'm saying. She's already put deposits down on the wedding vendors. Non-refundable. The Driscoll in December isn't cheap, and she's already had 3 dress fittings. Her stress eating is becoming a problem. She's up a whole size. Jackpot. I felt like I'd hit the divorce discovery lottery without having to pay my lawyer to dig through financial statements. I kept my expression neutral while internally doing cartwheels. Men and their financial schemes. So complicated. It's like they think moving money around is the same as being smart. By the time I left book club, I had 3 critical pieces of information. Graham had offshore accounts he hadn't disclosed in the divorce. He and Sylvia were engaged with a December wedding planned, and they were planning to celebrate at the Driscoll Hotel, Austin's most expensive venue, where the cheapest champagne costs more than my first car payment. All this while claiming poverty when it came to his son's education. I called Grace from my car, which still had the new leather smell that came from being part of my divorce settlement. "I need a forensic accountant, immediately, like, someone stole the nuclear codes immediately." Grace delivered as promised. By Friday, we had Randall Piven, financial investigator extraordinaire who specialized in high-conflict divorces with sneaky spouses, as he described it. He looked like an accountant from Central Casting, down to the bow tie and glasses, but spoke like a man who hunted financial fraudsters for sport. "Based on what you've told me and the patterns in his disclosed finances, I'd estimate we're looking at anywhere from 3 to 5 million in hidden assets," Randall said during our meeting, casually dropping a number that made me wish I'd asked for more in the original settlement. "But proving it requires documentation that would make a Vegas magician reveal his secrets." "Which I don't have," I admitted. "Not yet," Grace corrected with the confidence of someone who's seen behind the curtain at the financial Oz. "But Graham's arrogance will be his downfall. Men like him get sloppy when they think they've won. They're like villains who monologue instead of just shooting the hero." That afternoon, I received another text from Graham. "We need to resolve this school situation. Dinner tomorrow? For Ethan's sake." This time, I accepted. Know thy enemy, especially when they're picking up the check. The following evening, I arrived at Jeffrey's Steakhouse in a black dress that screamed "funeral for our marriage" and red heels that added 3 inches of height and confidence. My lips were the same shade of red as the bottom of my Louboutins, the universal color of mess with me and find out. Graham was already seated at a corner table, looking smug as ever, like a man who thought he'd successfully hidden his hand despite playing with his cards facing outward. "You look nice," he offered as I sat down. "Divorce agrees with me. It's like shedding 185 pounds of dead weight without having to do keto." He chuckled as if we were old friends sharing an inside joke, not a man who had once described me to his golf buddies as his starter wife. "Victoria, this whole situation has gotten out of hand. I'm willing to make the school issue disappear if you'll be reasonable about the lake house. Reasonable how? I asked, recording every word on my trusty Amazon pen, which was quickly becoming my favorite appliance, outranking even my Vitamix. The family has used that property for generations. My parents helped with the down payment. It's a Harrison legacy. That you signed over to me, willingly and with legal counsel present, unless your pen was filled with invisible ink or your brain was temporarily possessed by a ghost with poor negotiation skills. He leaned forward. Because you backed me into a corner with those recordings. But now I'm offering a fair compromise. Let me buy the house from you. Market value plus 10%. You take the cash, I take back what's rightfully mine, and Ethan stays at Lakeside. Everyone wins, except possibly whatever decorator convinced you seafoam green was appropriate for a lake house living room. I took a sip of the absurdly expensive bourbon he'd ordered me, savoring the moment like a cat watching a mouse walk into a trap. That's a generous offer, Graham. Just one problem. What's that? It doesn't account for the offshore accounts in the Caymans. What is that? 3 to 5 million? That's a lot of cocktails with little umbrellas in them. His poker face was impressive, I'll give him that. But the slight twitch of his left eye, his tell since law school and the same one he had when he claimed my meatloaf was delicious, gave him away. I don't know what you're talking about. His voice had the same authentic ring as a telemarketer claiming to be from the IRS. $3 to $5 million, Randall estimates. Money that should have been disclosed during our divorce proceedings. Money that, when reported to the Texas Bar Association, might raise some uncomfortable questions about an attorney violating financial disclosure laws. I hear they take a dim view of lawyers who treat ethics like optional extras at a car dealership. Graham's confident facade cracked just enough to reveal the panic underneath, like a beauty queen's smile when her double-sided tape gives way. You're bluffing! I smiled and stood up, dinner barely touched. You know what I learned from my poker champion father, Graham? Always know when to hold 'em, when to fold 'em, and when to walk away from a man who thinks hiding assets is easier than being honest with his wife of 7 years. I dropped my napkin on the table like I was dropping a microphone. This is me, walking away. You have 48 hours to drop the school tuition issue, permanently, before I file my motion detailing your creative accounting practices. I hear judges love financial fraud almost as much as they love attorneys who practice it. Victoria. Oh, and give Sylvia my congratulations on the December wedding. The Driscoll is gorgeous that time of year. All those Christmas decorations really dress up the ballroom. Though I hear deposits are non-refundable if the groom is disbarred and possibly incarcerated. Such a shame. I'm sure that Pinterest board was really coming along. As I strode out of the restaurant, heels clicking emphatically against the marble floor like a countdown to Graham's professional demise, my phone buzzed with a text from Grace. Randall found something. Big. Come to the office first thing tomorrow. The game was changing. Graham thought he was launching an offensive, but he didn't realize he'd been playing defense all along. Like a man bringing a butter knife to a gunfight and thinking he was over-prepared. Grace's office smelled like expensive leather and victory at 7:30 the next morning. Randall was already there, spreading documents across the conference table like a forensic accountant's version of Christmas morning. He had the gleeful look of someone who'd just found Jimmy Hoffa's tax returns. The offshore accounts were just the appetizer, he announced without preamble. The main course is much more interesting, and unlike Graham's cooking, it's actually substantial. He slid a folder toward me. Inside was a document titled Harrison and Associates, Client Trust Account Records. I don't understand, I admitted, scanning pages of numbers that might as well have been hieroglyphics to my design-oriented brain. Your ex-husband has been borrowing from his clients' trust accounts to fund his lifestyle with Sylvia, Randall explained, using air quotes so dramatic they deserved their own Broadway show. Weekend trips to Napa, that 3-carat diamond ring she's been flashing around town like she's signaling aircraft, even the deposit on their wedding venue, all paid with other people's money. It's like Robin Hood, if Robin Hood stole from regular people to give to his girlfriend's jewelry collection. My jaw literally dropped. Even I hadn't thought Graham would cross that line. Cheating on your wife? Sadly common. Like bad Wi-Fi or disappointing movie sequels. Stealing from clients? Career suicide wrapped in prison orange. How much? I asked. Just over 2 million, Grace answered, her shark smile making an appearance, which he's been temporarily replacing with funds from the Cayman accounts whenever audits happen, then moving back afterward. It's financial whack-a-mole with other people's retirement funds. That's embezzlement, Randall finished, and a one-way ticket to disbarment and possibly prison, or as I like to call it, karma's all-inclusive vacation package. Grace leaned forward, her eyes glittering with the focused intensity of someone who'd found a winning lottery ticket. Victoria, we have enough to not just win the tuition battle, but to completely destroy Graham professionally. The question is, what do you actually want? Total annihilation or strategic demolition? It was a fair question. Revenge had been sustaining me for months like an emotional IV drip, but was scorched earth really best for Ethan? For me? Did I want to be the ex-wife who sent her child's father to prison, or just the ex-wife who made sure he'd never financially recover from his own stupidity? I want 3 things, I decided. I want Ethan's school situation secured permanently. I want my fair share of those hidden assets. And I want Graham to experience the same humiliation he put me through, preferably in front of his country club friends who've been pretending not to see me at Whole Foods since the divorce. But, I added, I don't want to destroy Ethan's relationship with his father. Prison visits on alternate weekends aren't covered in our parenting plan. Grace nodded approvingly. Calculated justice, not blind vengeance. Let's make it happen. It's like the difference between using a scalpel and using a chainsaw. Both get the job done, but one leaves less splash damage. We developed what Grace called the triple threat strategy. First, file an emergency motion about the school tuition, with just enough hints about Graham's financial improprieties to terrify him like a teenager who hears a noise in the basement of a horror movie. Second, schedule a settlement conference where we'd reveal evidence of the offshore accounts, but not the client trust misappropriation. Third, keep the trust account information as our nuclear option. Leverage without detonation, like having a tiger on a leash but not letting it eat anyone. Yet, Graham's response came faster than even Grace anticipated. Within hours of receiving our motion, his attorney requested an immediate private meeting, with the urgency of someone who'd just discovered their pants were on fire. They're panicking, Grace observed, checking her watch. Good. Panic makes men in expensive suits sign expensive agreements. The meeting was scheduled for the following day at Graham's attorney's office. When we arrived, Graham looked like he hadn't slept in days, his usually immaculate appearance noticeably disheveled, as if he'd been dragged through a hedge fund backward. Barrett, his attorney, kept checking his watch nervously, probably calculating his hourly rate against his client's rapidly diminishing future. Let's cut to the chase, Barrett began, a bead of sweat forming on his upper lip. My client is willing to withdraw all objections to the tuition payment and sign a stipulation that he will never contest any educational expenses for Ethan in the future. Grace slid our counter-proposal across the table with the precision of someone dealing the final hand in a high-stakes poker game. Our terms have evolved, like a Pokemon, but with more zeros. Graham scanned the document, his face transitioning from pale to ashen, like watching someone cycle through an Instagram filter called impending doom. This is extortion. This is consequences, I corrected. They're like actions, but they happen afterward and usually involve attorneys. 3 million from the Cayman accounts transferred to a trust for Ethan's future. Full permanent custody to me with your visitation rights contingent on perfect compliance with all support obligations. And a public apology to me at the Harrison family summer gala. Think of it as performance art, but the art is your dignity. That's outrageous, Graham sputtered, looking like a tea kettle about to blow. I'll never. Page 2 outlines our alternative course of action, Grace interrupted smoothly, tapping a manicured nail on the document. It's like a choose-your-own-adventure book, but both adventures end with you losing. One just involves less public humiliation and potential incarceration. Barrett read it first, his eyes widening to the size of cocktail onions. He whispered something to Graham, whose defiance crumbled in real time, like watching a soufflé collapse in a slammed oven door. You wouldn't, Graham said quietly, all bluster evaporated faster than discount perfume. Even you wouldn't go that far. I leaned across the table, channeling every strong female character I'd ever admired. Try me. I used to help you practice your closing arguments, remember? I know exactly how to deliver one of my own. The difference is, mine would be to the Texas Bar Association and possibly the FBI. 20 minutes later, we had a signed agreement. Graham looked physically ill as Barrett notarized the documents, as if each stamp was landing directly on his future prospects. Was it worth it? I asked him when Grace stepped out to make copies. Throwing away our marriage, Ethan's stability, your integrity, all for what? So Sylvia could post Instagram photos from first-class lounges with captions like "blessed" and "living my best life" while using stolen money. That's not just morally bankrupt, it's creatively bankrupt. You don't understand the pressure I was under, he muttered. The firm, my parents, their expectations. It's not easy being a Harrison. No, you don't understand, I corrected. I spent 7 years supporting those expectations, planning perfect dinner parties for your clients, raising our son practically alone while you worked 80-hour weeks and apparently several hours weekly with your assistant's dictation. I would have continued supporting you if you'd just been honest and faithful. You didn't break our marriage because of pressure. You broke it because you were weak. Like undercooked pasta. Looks fine on the outside but falls apart under minimal pressure. His lack of response was all the confirmation I needed. Silence from Graham Harrison was rarer than a humble influencer. The Harrison Summer Gala was scheduled for the following Saturday at the downtown Four Seasons, since the lake house was unfortunately unavailable, which is how Diane Harrison described my refusal when talking to her country club friends, as if my home had developed sentience and decided to be difficult. I arrived wearing a red dress that cost exactly 1 week of Graham's spousal support payments. Sometimes revenge is best worn on the body. Diane Harrison nearly swallowed her pearl necklace when she saw me, clutching her champagne flute like it might save her from drowning in social embarrassment. "Victoria, this is a family event," she hissed near the champagne fountain, her smile frozen like she'd been Botoxed mid-grimace. "Yes. And until your son has our divorce agreement modified, I'm still technically family. Like that weird uncle no one talks about but who still shows up for Thanksgiving." I clinked my glass against hers. Cheers to traditions. And to prenups. Which I'm guessing you wish Graham had insisted on. The ballroom was filled with Austin legal royalty, old money, and the social climbers who orbited them like desperate satellites. The air was thick with expensive perfume and thinly veiled judgment. Sylvia was notably absent. Apparently, a migraine had struck the moment Graham told her about the new financial arrangement. Amazing how fiscal reality can trigger instant neurological symptoms. At precisely 8:30 p.m., Graham clinked his glass for attention and took the small stage where the band had been playing. He looked like a man walking to the gallows in a designer suit, his smile as genuine as gas station sushi. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," he began, voice unsteady like a freshman at his first frat party. "And I need to take a moment to address something important." The crowd quieted, sensing drama the way sharks sense blood in water. "For those who don't know, Victoria and I are no longer together. What you may not know is that our separation was entirely my fault." He swallowed hard, Adam's apple bobbing like a fishing lure. "I betrayed Victoria's trust in the worst possible ways. I lied to her, cheated on her, and then tried to manipulate her after she rightfully divorced me. I was, to put it plainly, a complete jerk who didn't appreciate what he had." Murmurs rippled through the ballroom like waves at a particularly gossipy beach. Diane Harrison looked like she might faint, clutching Robert's arm with the desperation of someone watching their social standing plummet in real time. "Victoria has shown remarkable grace throughout this process," Graham continued, each word clearly painful, like pulling social thorns. "She's put our son's well-being first and demonstrated a level of integrity that I failed to match. I owe her a public apology and my eternal gratitude for not pursuing certain actions that my behavior would have justified. Actions that would have had significant professional consequences." His parents exchanged alarmed glances that would have been appropriate if someone had just announced the building was on fire. They didn't know the details, but they understood enough to recognize the subtext. Their son had been caught doing something career-ending, and I had chosen not to pull the trigger. It was the country club equivalent of watching someone defuse a bomb on live television. To Victoria, Graham raised his glass in my direction. I am profoundly sorry. You deserved better, and I hope that someday I can earn your forgiveness, or at least your respect. The crowd, thoroughly confused but loving the spectacle like it was a reality TV season finale, applauded awkwardly as Graham practically fled the stage. I caught his father, Robert Harrison, staring at me with newfound respect, or perhaps fear. Either worked for me, like a versatile accessory that matches multiple outfits. As I prepared to make my own exit, Barrett approached, looking less like a shark and more like a remorseful barracuda. That was merciful, he said quietly. The trust account information would have destroyed him. I don't want destruction, I replied. I just wanted justice, and for my son to still have a father, flawed as he may be. Prison visits are hard to coordinate with soccer practice. Barrett nodded. For what it's worth, I've advised Graham to seek counseling. This was a wake-up call he desperately needed, like a defibrillator to the ego. On my way out, I passed Diane Harrison, who grabbed my arm with surprising strength for a woman in her 70s who had previously claimed she couldn't carry her own shopping bags. Why didn't you ruin him when you could have? She demanded. What's your angle? I gently removed her hand. The difference between you and me, Diane, is that I don't need to destroy people to feel powerful. I just need them to know that I could have. Good night. Lovely party. The crab puffs were almost as good as the ones I served at last year's gala. Almost. Driving home to my lake house, watching the water shimmer under the moonlight like nature's own mood lighting, I felt something unexpected. Peace. Not the burning satisfaction of revenge, but the quieter contentment of having stood my ground and emerged stronger. Like surviving a tornado and finding your house still standing while the storm chaser's van is upside down in a ditch. The next morning, as Ethan and I made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, his artistic direction, my spatula skills, my phone pinged with an email notification. Graham had enrolled in therapy, transferred the first installment to Ethan's trust fund, and signed Ethan up for the father-son fishing program he'd always been too busy for. Baby steps from a man who'd been crawling morally for years. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but sometimes justice isn't about destroying your enemy. Sometimes it's about creating consequences significant enough to force change, like training a particularly stubborn dog who keeps peeing on your designer rug. And sometimes, the most satisfying revenge is simply rebuilding a life so beautiful that the person who hurt you has no choice but to acknowledge what they lost. It's like renovating the house they abandoned, then having it featured in Architectural Digest. Petty, but with excellent interior design. 1 year after the summer gala showdown, I stood in my kitchen watching Ethan and his dad attempt to make s'mores in our backyard fire pit. Graham was showing him how to perfectly toast a marshmallow without setting it on fire, a skill that seemed ironic coming from a man who had so thoroughly burned down his own life and then tried to roast mine for dessert. Life after nuclear family fallout isn't what you'd expect, I told my sister Faye as we sipped wine on the deck. No one hands you a manual called, "So you've survived your husband's midlife crisis. Now what?" A guide to rebuilding while he's still finding pieces of his dignity. The past year had unfolded in ways I never could have predicted, like a reality show that suddenly introduces plot twists mid-season. Graham had actually stuck with therapy. Turns out having your entire professional reputation dangling over a pit of ethical violations is quite motivating, like training a dog with premium treats. But the treats are not going to prison. He'd moved from his depressing studio to a modest 3-bedroom in a family-friendly neighborhood, started showing up consistently for Ethan, and even developed the previously undiscovered ability to co-parent without being a complete jerk. It was like watching Godzilla learn to knit. Unexpected, slightly awkward, but oddly satisfying. Look at you, all emotionally evolved and stuff, Faye observed, refilling our glasses. Remember when you wanted to burn all his suits and mail the ashes to his law firm with a note that said, "Season's greetings from karma"? Growth, I shrugged, though I stand by that being an excellent idea at the time. Macy's would have charged a fortune for that level of custom gift wrapping. The truth was, finding peace had been its own journey, like hiking Everest, but with less oxygen and more legal paperwork. After the adrenaline of divorce warfare faded, I had to face the real question. Who was Victoria without the anger? Without the revenge plotting? Without defining myself as Graham Harrison's wife or Graham Harrison's ex-wife? It was like trying on clothes after a radical weight loss. Some things fit, others needed alterations, and a few needed to be ceremoniously burned in a cleansing ritual involving sage and tequila. The answer emerged slowly through late-night design classes, weekend redecorating projects, and my now flourishing interior design business that had started with a single Instagram post of the renovated lake house. Divorce Revival Designs had become my accidental brand, helping women reclaim their spaces after relationship endings. Turns out there's a substantial market for turning masculine leather and darkness man caves into something that doesn't scream commitment issues and repressed emotions. I specialized in replacing deer heads with actual art and converting sports memorabilia rooms into spaces where adults might voluntarily gather. "Mom, Dad says we can take the boat out tomorrow if you're okay with it," Ethan called. Chocolate smeared across his cheek in a way that would have sent the old Graham scrambling for wet wipes and hand sanitizer, as if the child had been dipped in radioactive waste. "Sure, kiddo. Life jackets non-negotiable. Unlike your father's first marriage contract," I added under my breath. "You're really doing this co-parenting thing, huh?" Faye asked after Ethan returned to marshmallow duty. "Like, actually functional divorced parents? I thought that was a myth, like Sasquatch or men who replace the toilet paper roll." "Weirdly, yeah. Don't get me wrong. I still occasionally imagine pushing Graham into the lake during handoffs. But Ethan deserves better than parents who can't be in the same zip code without World War III breaking out. Besides, revenge fantasies are exhausting. They're like Spanx for your mind. They might make everything look better temporarily, but eventually you just want to take them off and breathe. Here's what no one tells you about life after revenge. The satisfaction fades faster than you expect, like a sugar high followed by the crash. But the peace that comes from making choices your future self would thank you for, that compounds like interest on a portfolio your ex-husband can't touch. Graham and Sylvia didn't last, shocking absolutely no one except possibly Sylvia, who seemed genuinely surprised that a man who cheated with her might not be relationship material. The wedding at the Driscoll was canceled after the financial revelations, and the non-refundable deposits became an expensive life lesson. Turns out, when the lake house, expense accounts, and dreams of being a power couple's trophy wife evaporated, so did her interest, like moisture on a hot Texas day. Last I heard, she'd moved to Houston with an oil executive 20 years her senior. Some people never learn, but at least she's someone else's life lesson now, like a cautionary tale that keeps relocating. The Harrison family underwent its own recalibration. Diane still couldn't quite look me in the eye, but Robert had developed an unexpected respect for me, probably because I had the financial equivalent of nuclear codes and chose not to launch. He even asked for my help when they decided to modernize their downtown condo, though I suspect it was partly to monitor what I was doing with their lake house, and partly because Diane's decorating taste runs somewhere between stuffy colonial and dead monarch's palace. "I recommended all-white furniture for their living room," I told Faye with a smirk, "with their 5 dogs, and suggested white carpet for good measure." "You're evil. I love it. It's like psychological warfare, but with throw pillows." Grace Reynolds and I still meet monthly for martinis, a tradition that feels both celebratory and slightly conspiratorial. She says my case study is now part of her strategy sessions with new clients. The Harrison method, how to win without annihilation. I'd be lying if I said that didn't stroke my ego just a little, like being featured in a textbook about successful revenge served at exactly the right temperature. As for me, I'm dating again, cautiously, skeptically, and with far better boundaries than a heavily fortified international border. His name is Leo. He's a widowed architect with a daughter in Ethan's class, and he thinks my sarcasm is charming rather than unbecoming of a Harrison wife. The first time he said he was running late for our dinner reservation, I felt that old suspicion rising, but he was actually just running late. Imagine that. Not cheating, not lying, just genuinely stuck in traffic without an ulterior motive. It was so normal it felt revolutionary. "Victoria," Graham called from the fire pit. "We're out of chocolate, rookie mistake. Check the pantry, top shelf behind the healthy snacks. The hiding spot works because you've never once looked there. It's like putting something in plain sight, but the plain sight is a vegetable." He laughed, actually laughed, and headed inside. "We'll never be friends, Graham and I. Too much history, too much hurt. But we've found something that works better for us. Mutual respect with clearly defined boundaries, enforced by both legal documents and the knowledge that I still have copies of those trust account records in a safety deposit box. Trust but verify, as my poker-playing dad would say, or in modern terms, keep receipts." As the sun set over the lake, casting golden light across the water, I realized that the greatest revenge wasn't in Graham's public humiliation or financial penalties. It was in this. I had become the woman I was always meant to be before I got lost in being someone's wife. Like finding a vintage designer piece under layers of discount clothing. "Mom!" Ethan called, holding up a perfectly toasted marshmallow. "I did it. Look." I walked over and gave him a high five, catching Graham's eye briefly over our son's head. "Nice work, buddy," I said to Ethan, but the acknowledgement was for both of them. Progress, however small, deserves recognition, like training a previously untrained puppy to finally pee outside. The thing about revenge is that it's a lot like those marshmallows over the fire. Hold on too long, get too greedy, and everything goes up in flames. But know when to pull back, and you end up with something unexpectedly sweet, even if it's not what you originally planned. And sometimes the best revenge isn't serving it cold after all. It's not serving it at all, and finding that your life tastes better without it. Like finally trying the entree after filling up on appetizers of resentment for years.